have been working my way through the book of Job, looking at the Hebrew text along with commentary and application. What I'll be doing is translating the Hebrew and then doing a running commentary of the flow of thought of the great book of Job. I have been doing quite a bit of grammar work. I think on this video and some of the subsequent videos, I will not do the grammar as much as simply translating from the Hebrew text, along with seeking to capture the meaning of the text by way of commentary. And I might say application. So as we come to chapter 12, Job is finishing his speech to Bildad. He first appeals to God for deliverance from God's judgment on him, as well as posing a question concerning the purpose for God's affliction. Why is he doing this? Is the thought. He then reviews God's wonderful work in creating and caring for his for him, and also the wonders of his care. Was it only to bring later affliction upon him? In verses 8 to 17. Job's purpose was to receive such affliction. If that is Job's purpose, why shouldn't he have died in the womb, is his argument in verses 18 to 20. He then concludes this chapter by asking God for a brief relief, a brief respite before his death in verses 21 and 22. So we begin in verses 1 to 7, where God wants to know where Job wants to know God's purpose in afflicting him. Why are you afflicting me? Is Job's thought. So we begin in verse 1. My soul is weary of my life. So I'm going to give my complaint. And I am going to abandon upon me. In other words, I'm going to leave any fear of what my complaint is. And I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. So Job is saying, I'm going to give open honesty about what I'm feeling and what I'm going through. So he wishes to get his complaint out in the open, is the idea here in verse 1. So then he goes on, I will say unto God, do not condemn me. Do not cause me to be condemned. Make known to me why you are contending with me, or why you contend with me. So what Job is asking God is to stop punishing him without giving reasons why. Why, God? Stop punishing me. Why don't you give me reasons? Is Job's point. And then in verse 3, he continues, is it good for you that you should oppress, that you should despise, literally, the work of your hands, and shine, or cause to shine upon upon the wicked, upon the counsel of the wicked, that you should shine upon the counsel of the wicked. I think the thought here is Job cannot believe that God could have pleasure in treating him as one of his created beings as having no value, especially when he is righteous, and at the same time to seem to smile upon the wicked and their counsel, I think is Job's point in verse 3. You shine upon the wicked, but you despise me, and I've been very righteous. I'm the work of your hands. Why are you oppressing me and shining upon the wicked that aren't going through this? I think is his point. And, you know, we've talked about this in Job before, that often people who are the opposite of trying to do good seem to have a great life. And sometimes people that seek to be righteous suffer. And so this is what the author of Job is dealing with. So then we come to verses 4 to 6. And notice Job then continues. Have you eyes of flesh, or as a man, as seeing as a man, do you see? In other words, or do you see as a man is seeing? Are your days as the days of man, and your years as a man's days? In other words, Lord, I don't understand what you are doing, that you inquire after, or that you seek after my iniquity, and that you search after my sin, that you focus so much on me. So as we look at verses 4 to 6, Job asks God if he only sees like a man, and if his lifespan is so short that he has to hurry to punish Job in an effort to uncover his guilt. Is not God eternal, and Job a righteous creation of God? Why are you doing this, God? Is Job's struggle. So it's sort of like he has taken his eyes now and has pointed them toward God in this at this time. And so as we continue then in verse 7, Job continues in verse 7. Although you know that I shall not be condemned, and you also know that there is none that can deliver from your hand. In other words, no one can save me from your hand, is Job's point. You do not need to punish me with such quick, violent means. You know that I am not guilty, Job argues, and that furthermore, you know that no one can rescue me from your affliction. Yet in its severity, it would seem that you might think that way. This is Job's argument. So in verses 8 to 17, Job reviews God's past care, how he's taken care of him. And yet he is amazed at his present affliction from God after such previous care. I think we all go through that. I mean, we look at our past and how God has cared, and then something happens, and we say, why, God, is it now? So this is what Job is going through. So in verse 8, he continues to talk about his past care. Your hands have framed me and made me, and together, round about everything, yet you now destroy me. In other words, what Job is saying is, God, you've made and fashioned me, and yet now it appears that you are destroying that which you so carefully made. That's his point. And so as we continue then in verse 9, remember now, I beseech you, that you have fashioned me as clay, that as clay you have made me. And now will you bring me or return me to dust? In other words, will you bring me to dust again, having fashioned me as clay? And notice what Job is saying here. As a potter, God had wonderfully fashioned and shaped Job. Is he now going to bring to dust and destroy his own vessel? That is Job's point, or the point of the book at this point, and Job's argument. So then in verses 10 and 11, it continues, have you not as milk, have you not poured me out as milk? And as cheese, have you not curdled me? You, notice verse 12, you have clothed me with skin and flesh. Literally, with skin and flesh. You caused me to be clothed. And you knit me with bones and sinews. And he's looking here, sort of amazing imagery here. God's formation of Job in the womb is poetically elaborated. He was poured out like milk in his mother's womb, and his first substance was like curdled cheese, for example. It was then to this substance that God made skin and flesh and knit together the bodies intertwining of bones and sinews. To me, this is another beautiful picture, poetic picture of God forming Job from his mother's womb. And it's very parallel to Psalm 139, where we were knit together in our mother's womb. And to me, this is another beautiful text on the sanctity of human life from conception to the very end of life. God is the one who is the potter and who is fashioning the clay and who is bringing it out pouring it out like milk and like cheese, curdling it and bringing together skin and flesh, doing it all from the womb. What a beautiful teaching here of the sanctity of life from conception on, and God as the great potter as the great creator of every life in the womb, from conception to the very end of life. So then, having said that, Job moves on then in verse 12 and says, you have granted, literally it's vivid here, life and favor. You have granted unto me. You've given me life. You've given me favor. And your providence has preserved or kept my spirit. So Job is saying, God, in your providential care, you have been involved in my whole life. That has resulted in my even being alive. God had granted Job life, and his care had preserved his life. And we can all say that, that God is the source of our life from our mother's womb. And so at this point, Job's going to go on in the argument of the book to talk about why God took such care. Was it that he might now afflict me? Will be Job's argument. I'm going to stop there. I'm trying to hold these to about 15 minutes if I can. So I think I'll stop there in this running commentary and translation of the Hebrew text, and trying to capture the great arguments and the great teaching of this wonderful book of Job. So we'll stop there and continue on the next verse in the next video.